Hi guys, it's Lucas from Avoca College, and in this video I'm going to go over the techniques of using a spline loft to create a spark plug. It's a fairly simple process, but it's also very powerful. So what you get with a spline loft is, if you create a line, so we can make a nice curvy, bendy line, and then along next to that we can create, let's do a star shape. Right. So now, select this line, and we want to go into geometry, compound objects, and loft. So from there, get shape, get star. So now you can see we have a nice lofted star that follows the original line. Okay, so let's get into making the spark plug. For something like a spark plug, there's a lot of images on Google that are nice side-on images. So as you can see, I've already gone through and found a bunch of images here. But something like this, we can use straight off. Like, we don't need to go off and create a blueprint because we basically already have a blueprint here. So I've just got a couple of other little reference pictures for some of the detail around the end, and just some references of how the spark plug should actually look in the final one. So what we're going to be doing is quite a high poly version of this, and we'll start off by putting the blueprint into 3D Studio Max, so we can then work on it from there. So just in 3D Studio Max, hit this button here to bring up the material editor. It can also be done by pressing the M button. So if I just press M, that'll close and open that back up. Now, grab our folder where we'd saved our reference images, and I'm just going to grab this blueprint, drag it into the scene there, so I can then close that folder or minimize that folder for later on. Double click on standard material. That brings our standard material in here, and we're just going to link that up to the diffuse. So we now want to, within the scene, I'll just go, and I want to go into the front viewport. Now let's go standard primitive, and make a plane. So this plane is what we're going to put the blueprint on. If you just press F3, it'll change between wireframe and smooth. So we just want it to be smooth, so we can actually see what's on it, not just the wireframe. When we put an image on top of this, we'll be able to see it. Just going to press G to turn the grid off. And the size of this plane we want to be proportional to the size of our image here. So you can see with that image selected, we can see down the bottom that it is 300 by 456. So let's just go back to max, and we want to be, so 300 was the width and the length was 456. So we've made the plane, and it's proportional now to the size of our image. So when we take this, and with the plane selected, select the standard material by double clicking it, and we're just going to go assign material to selection. So you can see it's assigned it to the selection there, but the image isn't actually appearing at the moment. So you can fix that by clicking show shaded material in viewport, and there you can see we have our blueprint in the background. I'm just going to close down that material editor. With our plane, I'm also going to reduce the length segments to 1 and 1. So now in the perspective viewport, I'm just going to maximize that up so it'll give a bit more space so we can see what's going on. Making sure that you have your units set up correctly. So we want to be in metric centimeters or millimeters. It doesn't really matter which one of these you go with, but centimeters is probably a little bit easier. And system units, 1 unit equals 1 centimeter. You need to make sure these units are set up correctly, otherwise when we export it to another engine from 3D Studio Max, like if we export it to UDK, it'll be at the wrong scale. So at the moment this isn't the correct scale because it is, it's 456 centimeters long, and I know a spark plug isn't that big, but we just wanted to get the image proportional so we can then scale it down to the correct size. So the way that we go about doing that is just in the middle of the scene, I'm just going to create a box by left click, drag, then release, and then left click again to finish it off. going to create a box in the middle, and I want the length of that, or the height of that box, to be 10 centimeters. And then I'll just turn these down to 1 and 1 just to fit things within the screen. Pressing W to get select and move, I'm going to right click these wheels to just center that right in the middle of the scene. So there it is there, and that's our reference object of the length that we want this this spark plug to be. So if I press Alt X, that'll also make toggles between transparency, so we want to make that semi-transparent. Just going to as well just click on the realistic and change it to shaded, because the realistic can slow down the machine as well as give some funny shadows when we're working with this kind of thing. Okay, so now we want to scale this down so the blueprint image is the correct size to go with, to draw over the top of, so we can then work with it and get all the scale and everything correct. So to start off, let's effect pivot only, and with the move tool, we're just going to move that pivot right down so it's basically in the, we've got it right in the middle of that bottom section of the spark plug. And turn off effect pivot only. Then while in the front viewport again, we're just going to right click these spinner wheels to zero everything out. So then if we just maximize that up, if we turn the grid on, you can see that that is right in the middle of the scene, right at the bottom, and then it's got this black one right through the middle of the spark plug. So now with the plane selected, go to press R to select the scale, uniform scale tool, and just make sure that you click so it's scaling along all axes. If you click on this line, it will actually only scale along those two axes, which, because this is just a plane, won't actually affect it. But if you are trying to scale it just by one dimension, you can see you can actually just scale by one by clicking on that particular axis. So I'm just going to Control Z to undo that scale. But what I want to do is scale this whole thing down. Again, just going to change this to shaded in the front viewport. Just turn the grid off. So I want to scale it so that the box is the same height as the spark plug. So now I know that this blueprint, the spark plug in that, is about 10 centimeters high, which is right where I want it to be. So I can just select the box and hide selected now, because I won't be requiring that anymore. Now we're going to go into actually creating the spline, which is our main base. So it's just going to be a straight line down the middle. So if you go to Create tab, and we want to go along to the shapes and line, I'm just going to click at the top of the spark plug, and we're going to hold down Shift. So by holding Shift, it'll make sure it does a straight line, and we're just going to continue that to the bottom of the spark plug, and we're going to hit right click to finish the line there. So you can see that's a little bit off for what we'd like. So we can go to the move tool, and just by right clicking the little wheels again, we'll move that so it is centered to the object. So if you just go to the modify tab, and then you can go into the vert mode and just make sure that lines up with the top of the spark plug. And this one down here, we just want to line up with this section of the spark plug, not the little part that extrudes, because we'll put that in later. Change that back off vertex mode. So that's our line through the middle of the spark plug. Now what we need to do is create some shapes that we're going to loft along that. So with a spark plug, you have these round sections, and then in the middle you have a hex nut. So the hex nut is a six-sided, what is actually called an n-gon within 3D Studio Max. So if I make one of those over there, and again, like, you can modify that. So in the modify tab, I could make it 8-sided if I wanted an 8-sided object, or six. So 6-sided is what we want, because that's your standard hex nut kind of thing. Now the other part is that we do want to do a cylinder around the middle here, but we don't want to do, in this case we don't want to do it as a circle, because I'll show you what happens if you do it as a circle. I'm just going to draw a new line over here just for this example. So if I have this line over here and I now go through to, so we want to go on the Create tab and Geometry, and then we're going to do Compound Objects and Loft, so Get Shape, so let's get that cylinder. Just go out to the perspective viewport, press Z to zoom in all extent, so that's showing that there a bit clearer. So what you got is your cylinder. So if I just press F3 to turn on the wireframe, now in the Modify tab I'm going to move along the path, so you can see the little yellow cross moving along the path. So if I move it, let's go about there, and then I go Get Shape and choose this, what you can see is the geometry of it gets all triangulated, and it doesn't line up very well because it's going from a different number of edges or vertices into this n-gong shape. So the thing that you can do to avoid that problem is if I go back to this n-gong shape here, I'm going to shift drag up to make a duplicate of that, so I want that to be a copy, and then I'm just going to click this circular tab here, so let's make it a bit smaller, about the same, and I'll do another line next to this one so you can see the difference of them next to each other. So just create a shape, line there, right click to finish it, Geometry, Compound Objects again, Loft, and I'm going to Get Shape, and I'm going to pick my circular n-gon. So there's my circular n-gon, and just press F3 so I can see the little X. I'm going to move that along. Now let's get shape again and choose my six-sided n-gon. Just right click to cancel the Get Shape, and if I turn on edge faces here, I'll just deselect them both. You can see the difference that makes. So this one has clean lines and clean edges because you're using the same geometry to morph between, whereas blending between the circle into the six-sided shape gives us these horrible tessellation and bad edges, whereas this is much neater and nicer. Okay, so I'll delete those, and I will delete my circle. So what we're left with is we have my n-gon, which I've changed to circular, and we'll just put that up the top here. Might be a little bit hard to see because it doesn't contrast well with the background. I'm just going to get that to around about the same size as the very top of the spark plug. I'll just put that off to the side there, and again for this one here I'm going to just get it to about the same width as the hex, and then just put it off to the side there. So now if I select my line that goes through the middle, I can now again compound object, and we're going to go Loft. Let's Get Shape, and we've got our cylinder. So as you can see now, it's turned into a cylinder right through the middle. Just display selected with edge faces. I'm just going to turn that off so you can see now that it's just a nice clean cylinder without, if I press F4 I can toggle on the edges to turn them off. Slide along the path a little bit, so we zoom in so we can see. It doesn't matter how far you do this because we can align it all later. But so we've got the little X there. Now let's Get Shape again and just click on. So we've clicked on our hex nut shape. I'm going to press Alt X to make this go semi-transparent. And I might just put forward and put the edges on now. So you can see now like that it isn't where we want it and it's not lining up. So if we go through to the Modify tab, and if you select Shape, you can then click and select that shape where we put it, and I can slide that up and down. So I can then, it's probably a bit easier to do in the front viewport, so just press F3 to turn the shading back on. We'll maximize that back out. I can then adjust that by moving it to exactly where I want it. So now we need to basically just fill out all these details that are along this SparkPlug, which is all quite easy, because you can do it by, you can select that shape, so it'll select that circle there, and if you hold down Shift, and we're just going to click on the arrow so it only drags it straight in the Z direction, and we're just going to click that and drag it straight down until it lines up to the next one. It'll pop up this box. Let's just hit copy and go OK. So you can see there it's created a new one. So we can press R and select the uniform scale tool. If I scale that up, there we go. We have it scaled up and it's in line with that. There's a bit too much geometry going on here, like all the detail with all these edges in between those two edges, and I want to try and reduce that. So what I can do to do that is, if you just click back on the loft, I'm going to go down to skin parameters. I'm going to change the, I think it's the, yep, the path steps to 0. So now, because it's putting 0, so if I put that 1, it puts 1 in between, whereas I put that at 0, it'll just go straight from, it'll only put edges or loop the edges around where I actually have placed the geometry of the shape. So with the path step set to 0, we can then continue on. So we're going to go back to shapes and just going to go to move tool, so W. I'm just going to be using W and R to switch between, this is the scale tool, this is the move tool. So the move tool has the little arrows on the end of it, and you'll see up here swapping between, and I'm just going to quickly go through and create all the extra edge loops that I need to go down here. So if I just hit W and I hold down Shift, drag, OK, and again R to scale it, I'm just going to go straight back, W, Shift, drag. Now this one is the same size, so I don't need to scale that one. W, Shift, drag, OK, hit R just to go out along there, W, I'm just going to do that all the way down until we're happy with how the geometry looks. Now this is going to be a fairly high poly model that we are making, so we might even just put a bit of a curve in for here. So what we could use this for when it's eventually done is it might be a close-up in a cutscene, or we could use it to render out normal maps for a lower poly in-game model, that sort of thing. And I've just got a little trick here that I'm going to do as well. So if I just skip over to the other side there, and I just put the extra loops in the middle. So I've put the 2 loops in there, and I can select both of those at the same time, just hit R to go to scale, and then scale them both in. So it saves you a bit of work if you do have to do multiple scaling. But the other trick that we can do here as well is, if I just drag select over both those, you can see this is a repeating pattern that I've got down here. So if I Shift and drag that whole selection down to there, you can see I've added an extra ridge there. And again, I can, being a bit funny with background, but so Shift dragging across both those lots there, and I can then drag that whole thing down again and save myself a bit of work and repetition by just multiplying and using the edges that I've already put in. So I'm just going to Shift and drag this one back here, and this one's a little bit different. I'll just grab that edge there, pull that down. Okay, so now we've got to where our hex nut is. I'm just going to go out to the perspective view so we can see a bit more of that. How we're going. So I'll just hit Alt X and F4 to turn off edge faces, so we can see how that's going. It is, it's looking quite good, and it's taking the form of the spark plug. I'll just hit Alt X. Go back to transparent, so now we can just shift drag that one down there, so we have our full hex nut there, and then shift drag again, just scale that in, just Alt X, so you can see that we do have, if I'll just deselect that, we do have quite good representation of what our spark plug shape is going to be. So just go back into the front view. I'm just going to finish off putting that all the way down. So Alt X, I'll select the object, Alt X to make it go transparent. And again back to grab our shapes. Just drag that one down there. Get that bit in the middle. Both of those. So to select multiple lines as well, if you click one line and you hold Control and click the other line, that'll let you select multiple lines. Just neaten that up a little bit. So we just want to go to the inside of the thread, because what we're going to do a bit later is we're going to create we're actually going to use a spring to create that thread on the outside. So we just want this part to be a little bit smaller than the thread. That should be fine like that. And that's pretty much it as far as the lofting goes. So we can just go out to the perspective viewport here. We'll just Alt X so we can see if I hide unselected, we have our main part of the model of the spark plug. To continue on from here, we're going to make a clone of this just so if we do need to make any changes or anything to this at this level, we don't have to try and backtrack and go through. So I'm going to do that by if I just go to move mode, hold down shift, and I'm just going to click and drag, and that will create a copy of it. We're going to name that one M underscore spark plug. So the reason that I'm making a copy of this is because I'm no longer going to be using the lofting tool. Like, I'm happy with what I've done as far as the lofting tool goes. So I'll just select that one there, and I will hide selection to get that out of the way, and I'll right click that spinner to get this one back to 0. And I'm going to now convert this to an editable poly. So now that we have the main geometry of it done, using an editable poly, we can finish off a couple of the little extra parts. So the little tip bit that goes on the end of the spark plug, if I just bring up the reference images, so this part here is what we're going to model in, and all this little center bit. And it's much easier to do that with editable poly. You don't need to use a loft to do it. It's much easier this way. So what I'll start off with is the very point of it. I'm going to select this whole face here. So just in polygon mode, so make sure you're in Modify tab. This is an editable poly, and we're in polygon mode now. So I select that one there, and just scroll down the list, and we'll have a bevel. Okay, so what bevel does is it'll extrude a face, but it'll also bevel so it tapers in. So we don't want to go out. Actually, we don't want to go out at all. So we're just going to take that back to 0. But just make sure. Okay. Might just right click that one to take that back to 0 as well, and we'll just start from there. So we just want to go in a relatively small amount. It's really hard with these small models. Just trying to get it nice and close. Okay, so probably something around about that there would be nice. I guess negative 0.15. That's pretty good. So I'm just going to hit the tick and accept that. So now I can do the extrude, and again, like, it's very, very touchy at these small sizes, so I just want to extrude that back up inside itself about, so let's go negative 1. Okay, now we can go back to the bevel tool again. So that's probably about right. Just do another negative 0.15 and hit the tick. Actually, we don't want to hit the tick on that one. We can just hit the plus because we do want to do more of them. So now we're going to bring that down just a little bit at a time. Okay, I might just go in the front view, and I'm going to unhide all, select that, select the plane with our blueprints on it, and hide unselected, so that's going to get rid of everything else but what we're actually using. So if we just go to F3, zoom back in the front mode. So we're going to go into polygon mode again. So if you can see, we still have that face selected there. So we don't want to pull that down. We want to bevel that face. I'm just going to adjust that. Just hit F3 to get the blueprints showing in the background. I'll just Alt X for a bit of transparency. There's something about there. We'll make it a little bit bigger. Right, now we're just going to hit the plus. So what the plus does is it'll add that, but then it knows that you want to continue on doing some more. So the next one is going to be, we're going to set the height to 0. Actually, it's added in one too many for me. Not sure why it's done that. Let's cancel that back. We'll just move that one back up there. And again, I can go press R to choose the scale tool, get that to the right size, and I'll just go W, so I'll move it back in line. So now from there, I'm going to extrude, let's get that back to 0. Just that little bit there, and let's hit the tick, and we've got our little tip on it there. So if I just Alt X, so it's showing shaded again, and see we've put our little tip onto it. So now we need to do this small curved bit here. We're going to use a couple of different tools to do that. But what I want to do is in polygon mode again and select these two polygons, so one on either side of the plane, just on the side where that edge is, and we're going to extrude. So I want to extrude whatever value is fine, and then we'll just actually move it to exactly where we want it. So now I need to make this part bend around here, and I want it to be a nice smooth bend. So I'm going to do it using a bend modifier, but to do it using a bend modifier, so we don't apply the bend modifier to the whole model, we just need to select the actual faces that we're going to do it. So if I extrude that out again, I'm just going to tick that off, and that's probably going to be enough for my bend. So now I want to go to edge mode, and I'm just going to drag select, so select those edges through there, and just I want to connect, so I'll bring up the menu. Let's go 4 of them, should probably be enough. So you can see that's added a bunch of extra edges through there, and that's what I want. So now I can go to polygon mode, and I want to select all those faces that I just created there. Now this part is it's really important that you don't want to go back into editable poly mode, editable poly at the top of the stack. You want to have it on polygon here. So while you have it on polygon and you have these faces selected, we're just going to add a bend modifier. So what this does is, okay, so you can see that's doing something, but it's bending in the wrong direction. So if we tick through these, okay, so that's it. We want to bend at 90 degrees in the Y direction, but as you can see, the bend is sort of messing up a little bit at the top there, because we're bending it from the middle of our selection and not from the top of our selection. So what you can do there is if you just roll out the little bend modifier, and you can adjust the center of the gizmo. So if I just click and drag that up till it lines up with the top, which is where I want to start the bend. Something along the lines of that is pretty much it, and we're done. So we can then right click on that and collapse to. It'll give this little warning box, and it's like, yes, we understand, and click yes. So it's then collapsed everything down to that that one editable poly as well. We've got rid of that bend modifier. So now I'll just go back to the perspective viewport again, so we can see this. We want to select these 2 faces on the end here, and we're just going to extrude those out a little bit there. So let's go to vertex mode. The gap's probably a little bit big, so if I select all these, make sure that you are in view, because it will change to local after you've been going through the different modifiers, and we're just going to drag that down a little bit there. Okay, let's just go back to the top level, hide unselected, and there we have it. We have our SparkPlug. You can see some of the smoothing areas aren't working so well, so that's something that we changed by setting up smoothing groups. And how smoothing groups work are, so in the editable poly, let's go to polygon, and let's say, for example, I'm going to grab this whole SparkPlug, and if I scroll down the list here, these are the smoothing groups. So if I hit clear all and just turn edges off, you can see that none of those faces smooth to the face that's next to it. They're all as individual faces, and the normals don't smooth over to the next face. These ones here, because they are in a straight line, even though they're not smoothing, because they are in a straight line, they do look like they're smoothing. So what smoothing groups do is, so say for example on this corner here, if I wanted that to look nice and smooth across there, I can select those 2 faces and set them both to smoothing group 1. So as long as they're both smoothing group 1, you can see it gives the illusion of being smooth, like it takes away that hard edge. But if this one is 2, then it knows that it's a different face that it's not meant to smooth onto. So for this whole thing, what I usually do is I'll just start out by selecting the whole model, clearing all smoothing groups, and then set smoothing groups to 1. And I just sort of find, for me, one of the easiest ways to go through and set up smoothing groups is just by doing it in sections like this. So obviously through the middle for our hex area, we want that not to be smoothed. So I can then go through here, and if I just drag and select through there, make sure that when you're doing this that you don't accidentally select something on the back that you're not meaning to, or something in the background. So you know, if for example I drag, select through there, you can see I've accidentally done some extra polys. So make sure you kind of straight on, drag select through, and just have a look around, or press F3 to go to wireframe mode. Make sure you only have the polygons selected that you wanted. Okay, so with that, so now I have those selected, I can then go down here, and this number here is the angle that I want to auto smooth. So in this case, anything with an angle sharper than 45 degrees, it will break the smoothing groups. So I want to turn that right down for this case. So I'm going to go to like 5 and click auto smooth. If I just deselect that and turn edges off, you can see there. Now I've got my nice hard edges through the middle there, like I wanted. So basically we just need to go through the rest of the model and do that for the specific areas that we need to. So we might go to the front viewport just to make things a bit easier to select. I'm just going to press F3 to go into wireframe mode, and some of the areas that I do want to be individual smoothing groups. So I want to select that area through there, and I'm going to turn this up all the way because I want most of this to be smooth, and I will put these edges in later. So I'm just going to hit auto smooth on that there. Actually it has done 2, so I don't think that was high enough again, but auto smooth. So everything is set to smoothing group 2 now, which will mean if I just deselect that, sorry, just turn off the edge faces. It has smoothed in all these little grooves and everything, but that's one of the areas that I don't want to be smoothing together, but I do want them to have their own individual smoothing groups. So I'm just going to control and select through the middle of each of these, and then back up to the top of the polygon modifier. I'm going to click grow. So what grow does is it'll grow the selection, so it'll move it to the next face. So if I press grow again, you can see it's gone out to all the next faces. I'll just Control Z to undo that. Now I'm just going to go back down again to my smoothing groups area, and I'm going to auto smooth those areas in between. So I just unselect that, edge face off. You can see now we have the nice hard edges through there, but smooth through the middle. So that's how I was wanting it to look. So just like that there, which is quite good. So we need to go through the whole model and just do that for each of the faces that shouldn't be smoothing to each other. So next one I'll do is I'll just select that through there, hit auto smooth, and this one here. Also, while I'm doing this, I think this should actually be fairly flat, so I'll just maximize that viewport up. You can see that there's a bit of an angle on the edge there, and it does sort of ramp off. I want that to be quite flat, which isn't totally possible to do with the lofting tool. So I can go through and select all those vertices. If I just go down the list here, and I want to flatten those all along the same plane. So if I just hit X, that's the wrong one, and Y, okay, so you can see there, and it's flattened it all out. I'm just going to do that again with the polygons below. So just the Y, and that's made that all nice and flat. So now again, if I pick these polygons and select the other ones by holding Alt and dragging across them, and then for the smoothing groups here, I want to turn this down to 90 and then auto smooth. And again for this face here, auto smooth that one, auto smooth that one, click the whole tip quite smooth. So that should okay, so you can see that's quite nice now, and we're using the smoothing groups to define particular areas and make sure that there's hard edges where there needs to be and there's not where there doesn't. Actually, just looking, that is a funny one around there, so we might just... Okay, if you select a polygon and then hold shift and click a polygon next to it, what it'll do is it'll select all the polygons that are in line with that one, which is what I wanted to do, except for I didn't want those ones. So I'm just going to unselect those and hit auto smooth there. See, that's much better. So I'm pretty happy with that as the basic geometry of the spark plug. The only thing that we need to add in now is a thread, and what I'm going to do for that is, it's cheating a little bit, but it is, since we are doing this as a fairly high poly version, so it's okay to sort of go around this workflow, as long as it's going to be for something like you're rendering it out, it's going to be viewed up close, or you creating it to be used as normal, as a reference for normal maps. So what I'm going to do is just under the Create tab and Geometry, I'm going to create a dynamic object, and what that dynamic object is going to be is a spring. So I'll start it right next to it. So we want to make it about the same size and about the same height as this area where the thread's going to be. So then we can go onto the Modify tab. We can scroll down here. The first thing that I want to change is the number of sides. So I'm going to turn that down to 3. But I also want to change on that the smoothing groups. So picking which sides it smooths from. So I'm just going to change all to sides. So you can see now it kind of looks like it's got that nice hard edge like a thread. But we obviously need a few more turns in that, but before I do that, I'll just get it lined up correctly with the model. So if I just right click these spinners, that'll center it to the world, which is the center of where our model is. Okay, so we just back up the top of the spring modifier. Let's get the height, so we'll just adjust the height so it's just out of view, so it just goes through that top part, which is actually the washer up there. Then we're going to do the diameter down a little bit. That's pretty good there. Now we need to adjust the turns because we want it to be a thread, so we need a whole lot of turns. Something around about there is probably pretty good. I might just move it up a bit because we're just hanging a little bit over the edge. And that's pretty much it there. So that was our little bit of a cheat for using a spring to make a thread. What we would also generally do with that is if you go out and you go to the top viewport, you can see through here that the number of sides on this is quite different to the number of sides that are on our geometry over here. So just undo to move that back in. While looking down from the top, I can adjust the turn segments, and you can see that's adding. So that's adding extra segments to our spring every time I turn that up. And what's a good work practice to do in the case of this, being a very high poly model, is try and get the number of segments to match up in cases like this. So I want to go a few more there. So basically I can keep clicking the turn segments until it will get to a point where you can see all of these edges all line up, and that's showing that basically all these edges through here all line up the whole way down. So if I just turn that on, you can see like these edges line up the whole way through, and it does look like a nice loop. So I can then, if I select back onto my spark plug, go up the top here, I'm just going to click attach. I'm going to attach that spring. So if I turn all my edge faces off, you can see there we have a really good high poly SparkPlug model that's ready for UV unwrapping and texturing.